Hey everybody, welcome to WithJosh.com. I am Josh Skinner, and with me is Dennis Haskins.
Hi, how are you?
AKA America's favorite principal. I'm Mr. Belding.
There you go.
Dennis, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it.
Pleasure. Can I just say thanks to everybody that's voted they want to see me on your website?
Oh, absolutely.
You were just telling me off camera that it's crazy.
One of the top 3. Yeah.
Wow.
So
wow, pretty cool.
Well, how's that feel? 20
Feels
years
great.
Later.
It's amazing. Well, it's 20 years since we started.
Right.
But it doesn't feel 20 years later because the show's on every day. And I just did a thing with Jimmy Fallon in New York where we were trying to get the cast reunited, but they ended up 5 out of 7 said they would come. But Tiffany and Dustin weren't involved, so at least even their show, even people, their producers grew up watching the show. Even Jimmy loves the show.
Oh, he loves it.
It's just amazing to me.
Well, take the whole theme of the website is obviously pop culture, and we say that everybody has a story. So take me back before Saved by the Bell started.
I have so many stories.
Oh, okay.
Where do you want to go?
Well, let's start. You were approached by your agent about this show, I'm assuming.
No.
How did tell me about how you became Mr. Belding.
I was, well, it really goes back about 20 years, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I first got to town and I was doing a show, and somebody said, if you write a guy named David Galligan a note, and he's writing a column for Drama Log, which is now Backstage West, he'll put you in his column. So I sent him a note, he put me in his column, and I wrote him a thank you note. And he wrote me back. Nobody had ever written him a thank you note. I mean, it's crazy, right? So we became friends, and cut to about 7 years later, he was directing a show, and he called me and he said, "There's a role for you. There's a role that you may be able to do in the show. Watch for it in the releases for the characters." So I watched for it, and there were 2 characters who tap and are tenors, but I'm not either one. I'm a baritone, I don't tap. So I called and said, "Thanks, but I can't do that." And he goes, "No. They left your part out because they just added it in New York, and now it's here in LA. So, and it was going to be Equity Waivers, small theater, Long story short, I got the part.
Okay.
The show becomes a hit. It's Angry Housewives. The lady I'm playing with is Joan Ryan, and we didn't necessarily get along all the time. There was a little tension with us, but we respected each other. Great talent, and actually we became friends after that. So, she came in one day and said, "Hey, I just auditioned for this show. They're looking for a principal. It's called Good Morning, Miss Bliss," right, with Haley Mills,
right,
predecessor of Saved by the Bell. So she said they were looking for a guy who's black and about 50, but they can't find somebody they want, so they've opened it up. I called my manager at the time and I said, "Hey, there's this part for a principal." She goes, "Dennis, you're not black and you're not 50. I said, "I know. They've changed what they're looking for." So the casting director came, saw me in the show. I got an audition. I go to the audition, and there's these 2 guys there that are in this group called El Grande de Coca-Cola, which is real, very, very, very funny, very broad comedians. But they had on plaid jackets, bow ties, and horn-rimmed glasses. And frankly, I was a little intimidated because I'd seen their show recently, and they were very good. They went in first, and I had on a sport coat. I bought a tie. I didn't even have a tie. So I went in to look like I thought a principal would look, who happened to be funny, not outside in, inside out. And I walked in, and I had just seen those guys, and I said, "Hey, if you're looking for, hey, waka waka, whoa, that's not what I do." And they said, "We're off to a good start." So, having done the show for so many months, I knew what I do. I mean, I was in good acting shape, if that makes sense. So I got past that audition, went to another one. On the 5th audition, it went 5 times, as they narrow people down, I know. We went to the network. So, I go to the network, and I did pretty good, but often like now, see how we can't see it on camera, but there's a door with some blinds, and,
right,
and the blinds are open, so it's a little hazy. So it's just a little distracting. And I did pretty good though. I came out, and the casting director said, "Thank you, we'll let you know." So Shayna Landsberg, by the way. And I went outside to the phone booth in the Midway, which is where Leno was doing his concerts in the park when it was Tonight Show on Stage 3. Which we started Saved by the Bell on, by the way. And I called my manager again. I said, I just got out of the network, and I got to get back in there. And she said to me, sometimes you just have to let things go. There's going to be other projects. And I hung up on her. And I called Peter Engel myself.
Whoa.
Not supposed to do that. Not supposed to do that.
Executive producer.
Executive
producer.
Show. Yep. He got on the phone. I said, "How'd I do?" I don't know. I just was desperate, to be honest with you, to get back in there. And how'd I do? And he said, "You did great. We're going to bring you back." Well, he later told me that when I called him was when he decided to bring me back. Next audition was with Haley Mills. We were basically rehearsed with Haley Mills, the people that were going in. And then we went back to the network. Back to the network. There's 4 of us. And the guy was there before, and 2 new guys. And I looked at this one guy and I thought he could do the part. Because he looked right and all that kind of stuff. I wish I could remember his name. All 4 of us went in, we did 2 scenes, and they came out and they told 2 people they could leave. They left me and the guy I thought could do it. So they came out and there was one more scene. It was my favorite scene of the 3. And they brought Haley out and we ran his lines with us, and he told me to go first for some reason.
Do you remember that scene?
Oh yeah. I don't remember that. It was about going to see Telly Savalas in dinner theater somewhere.
Okay.
I don't know, it was pretty funny stuff. I asked Haley if I could stand on the left side of the room. Haley went in and she stood on the left side of the room. And I went, Haley? She goes, oh, sorry. She's British. Came over here. And somebody said, how you doing? I said, great. She said, liar, tell them how you really feel. And the room laughed. I started the scene. I didn't wait for somebody to say started and wait for them to die down. I figured the scene was already going, you know. I did the best I could possibly do. So when I tell people many times I felt the best and the worst I've ever felt. Because there was no going back to the payphone. There was no calling Peter. This was it. And I'm listening while the other guy goes in, and he did really well. They were cracking up and laughing hard and all that kind of stuff. So he comes out, we're in the hallway, and he said, I'll flip you for it. And I said, nah, I don't think so. Yeah, I wasn't even willing to give up even that much. Cassie, Shane Lansberg comes out again. She goes, thank you. We'll let you know. Only this time. I would do this to the camera. She looked at me and she goes, she let me know I got the part. And I went,
What was that like? What was that moment like?
oh man, it was just such a rush of feelings. I wanted to like be really excited, but at the same time, I knew she kind of let me in on a secret, so I couldn't let this other guy know.
Right.
Who was, you know, was a really nice guy. So we're walking down the hall. What do you think? I don't know. Hey, I'm going to go back and use the phone. You know, he went down the elevator and I went back, and they said, congratulations, you got the part. That was it. Look at all the things look at all the connected dots that happened along the way from 20 years before.
Now, take me to the very first day of Saved by the Bell. After it switches
Miss Bliss?
from... Yeah, no, actually, from
Saved
when
by
it
the
switches over from Miss Bliss to Saved by the Bell.
We actually had
We
had a meeting. We had I don't know if we had a big table read. We're in a big room. And everybody's excited. Tiffany brought up a video camera. We're walking around the stage. We're seeing the stage, and I got to tell you, for me, honestly, going from Good Morning Miss Bliss, where Haley Mills was the star of the show and I was the principal, so as the adult I had a big part. I had 2 lines in the first episode. And I went to one of the writers, Bob Colery, R.J. Colery, who's done a lot of other shows. I said, dude, he goes, don't worry about it, just do your best. I did those 2 lines like it was Oscar material, you know what I mean? Or Emmy material being on television. And got laughs on both lines, and the next week there was more. And then there was more, and then there was more. But it was pretty cool.
Were you sad to see Haley go?
I was sad. As a matter of fact, the way I found out I was going from Miss Bliss to Saved by the Bell is our wardrobe guy, Nelson, came up to me after they told us we weren't going to do the show Miss Bliss anymore. Like 2 days later, he goes, hey, they told me to save your suits. Yeah.
Wow.
That's how I knew I was going on. I said, what about Haley? And he shook his head, no. Oh, man.
Why do you think they made that decision?
Well, it was Disney and NBC.
Right.
And Haley was with Disney. And NBC had decided, along with Brandon Tartikoff and Peter Engel, Silver Spoons was very popular with Ricky Schroeder, and they decided Mark-Paul could be as popular as Ricky Schroeder, so they decided to focus on the kids instead of the adults and move it to Saturday morning and do this whole thing for kids, and that's how the whole Saturday morning lineup started. You know, you could just feel it was different with Mark-Paul and Mario, that whole dynamic, and the girls all seemed to click. And Ed Alonzo was with us,
right?
Who played Max on the Max, and he had his whole thing going. It was a very upbeat thing, and Brandon was behind it, and it was really, you could tell something good was going on.